Lance Stroll had another really bad race in Shanghai, and it looks like the Canadian driver just wants to show everyone in Formula One that he's only there because his dad owns the team. Even though he said some mysterious things about his future in racing, the team still wants to work with him for a long time. But after what he did in China, it's pretty clear that his father should think twice if he really wants his team to win championships. But this whole father-son thing is pretty complicated. So could Lance actually ruin Aston Martin's chances? And if that's true, can Honda do something to help? The Chinese Grand Prix went from bad to really bad for Lance Stroll. First, his teammate Fernando Alonso beat him in qualifying again. Then he crashed into Daniel Ricciardo from behind during a safety car period, which was super weird and left all the Formula One experts shaking their heads. Lance blamed Ricciardo and said he was brake testing him, which is a pretty funny and strange excuse. This happened when they were in the middle of all the other cars, and there were at least 3 cars in front of them. But this crash totally ruined what was going to be a good race for Ricciardo, who had to stop racing. The fact that Stroll called him an idiot just made people talk even more about whether Lance acts professional and belongs in Formula One. The race officials gave Lance a 10-second penalty that he had to take during his last pit stop, and he finished dead last, which was just the perfect ending to his terrible performance this season. We can easily say his driving is nowhere close to what you'd expect from a team that's fighting Mercedes for 4th place in the team championship. Before this race, there was only 1 point difference between these teams, with Mercedes ahead. But after Hamilton and Russell had a great sprint race and finished higher than Alonso in the main race, plus Hamilton's amazing 9th place finish after starting at the very back, Mercedes is now 12 points ahead. It doesn't help that out of the 40 points Aston Martin has scored this season, 31 of them came from Alonso. He has now scored more than 3 times as many points as Stroll, and is sitting in 10th place with 9 points next to his name. After the latest crash in China, fans are even more angry about what the team said about Lance's future in racing. Aston Martin thinks he's really important for their future because he knows a lot about the technical stuff. Even if that's true, with only one driver scoring almost all the team's points, you have to wonder if Aston Martin will be stuck racing in the middle of the pack unless something changes in that second seat. Is there any chance we might see Stroll leave the sport while his father still owns the team? The accident in China made people talk about this even more. When Lance talked about it, he kept saying it wasn't his fault for the crash that ruined Ricciardo's race. He said it was like a chain reaction, where someone at the front of the group hit their brakes, he doesn't know who, and then everyone stopped. The car in front of him just stopped going from 60 kilometers per hour to 0, and then, boom! So it was really dumb. It was one of those situations, and he thinks it's just because he hit the guy, but someone hit the brakes and caused this whole mess. He doesn't know, but he thinks it's a joke that he got a penalty because of what happened when he hit Ricciardo. It's not like everything was normal, and he just crashed into the back of him on purpose. It was a really weird chain reaction that he wishes the race officials had thought about more. But the truth is, Ricciardo wasn't leading the race. They were both stuck in the middle of all the cars, and Stroll should have been paying way more attention to what was happening in front of the Australian driver instead of just staring at the back of the RB car. To make things worse, Ricciardo was really mad after the whole thing. He said that after watching Stroll's onboard camera, he could see that Lance wasn't even paying attention to what was happening in front of him, which is pretty unprofessional and like a beginner mistake to make during a race. When talking about the crash that completely broke his car's diffuser, Ricciardo said this was a restart of the race, so we don't know what the leader is going to do, so you have to be super careful. How hard Stroll hit him was crazy. Pretty much half of Lance's car went under his, so it wasn't a small mistake. He was way off. To him, there's no excuse. What made it even more frustrating was watching Stroll's onboard camera where he's not even looking at Ricciardo. You can see his helmet. He's looking at the corner instead. He doesn't know why Lance isn't looking at the car in front. Just like Ricciardo, there are many people who have no idea why Stroll is still racing in Formula One, even though the answer is pretty obvious. His father owns the team. Aston Martin has said that their future depends on the young Canadian driver, and the technical knowledge he brings to the team based in Silverstone seems really important when it comes to keeping a driver like Stroll. Even though this skill of Lance's could easily be used in the simulator or other racing categories that Aston Martin competes in. Even Max Verstappen was shocked and started laughing when he saw how Lance hit Ricciardo from behind, not being able to understand if this really happened during the safety car period because it was so bizarre. Still, the question remains: should Aston Martin plan for a future with Lance as the second driver? With Honda joining them starting in 2026, Aston Martin expects to become as competitive as the top teams. But for them to do that, they need two drivers who will score high points every single week. And so far it looks like Alonso is the only guy Aston Martin can count on. But Honda's relationship with their own drivers is pretty special. We've seen how they treated Tsunoda when he was doing really badly at AlphaTauri, only for the Japanese driver to turn things around at Racing Bulls and now be considered one of the best options for a seat at Aston Martin if things change there soon. But since the Silverstone-based team doesn't want to let go of Lance, a statement that might have been made because Lawrence pressured them, you can't help but notice the self-destructive pattern the team is doing to itself just because of the father-son relationship in the team ownership. When talking about Lance's future, Aston Martin's team boss Mike Crack said last week that the news was mainly about Alonso, but they also know that Aston Martin is Lance's home, and the whole project has always been built around him, so they want things to stay the same. He's always said this is very important, so they'll see what happens in the next few weeks. But on the other hand, Koji Watanabe, who runs Honda's Formula One program, said that Honda's main goal is to have the best possible driver lineup starting in 2026. If they see Lance continue to mess up from 2026 onward, it's pretty safe to say they'll put a lot of pressure on Lawrence to change the drivers. Even with Alonso, who isn't even close to being as bad as Stroll, they're not even in the same league. Honda had long talks before they agreed that working together was the right way to go after their disappointing time at McLaren back in 2017. So it's really important for Lance to understand that just because his father owns the team doesn't mean his seat will be safe once a bigger company joins and starts demanding good results. This is where Aston Martin needs to answer a lot of tough questions, with the most important one being whether they're ready to get rid of the comfortable situation they've created for Lance and start getting great results, or if they want to keep fighting in the middle of the pack after all their investments and keep disappointing people and fans around the world. It's pretty safe to assume there will be lots of protests against Lance if he keeps making the same racing mistakes week after week. So with all this in mind, there are a lot of things that still need to be fixed once the Silverstone-based team enters this new era with Honda. This is mainly because Honda will be joining them after doing really well with Red Bull, and the last thing they'd be happy with is watching Lance destroy every chance they have at being competitive. If nothing changes, this will definitely make the Japanese company take some much-needed action, and they'll definitely have a much bigger say in choosing drivers than Mercedes, for example, who currently supplies engines to Aston Martin. With this in mind, do you think Lance should leave the team as soon as possible? Let us know in the comments below.